Every Friday, we do a segment called Friday with Friends, where I bring an interesting friend of mine on to talk about news, politics, sometimes just life. An interesting one today, one of the most trying, I guess is a fair word, moments in my career came during the summer of 2020. Of course, we had just nonstop riots and unrest in the city of Seattle following the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. We had the infamous Chaz Chop situation where my crew was mobbed and chased into a fire station. But before that, one of the security guards that we worked with during this period of time was down with us during the worst riot of them all in downtown Seattle. This is something that, you had widespread looting, you had cop cars being burned, and many of you will remember my security guard captured on camera disarming a rioter of a stolen Seattle police rifle. And not only did he do it once, he did it a second time. And honestly, he's just an all-around badass. Well, this really launched someone who was very private into the public spotlight in a huge way. He and I have been friends ever since. And he joined me to talk about kind of how that one instance changed his life and his view in hindsight on everything that went down in the summer of 2020, or as the former mayor of Seattle called it, the summer of love. Joining us on Fridays with Friends is the Weapon Snatcher, Shooter Rughi. What do you want me to call you these days?
Everyone just calls me Rughi now.
So, for people who aren't familiar, tell them about the first time we met.
At the newsroom before we had to go to work. That's when we actually first met. But the reason why everyone wants to know is because of the 2020 riots in Seattle, where you were reporting on it live, and I was your security.
And what some people don't know is that was your first time doing security for a news crew. I actually first met you in the parking lot because I pulled up and said, "Hey, dude, you can park your car behind the gate if you want." Um, what were your expectations, I guess, about doing security for a news crew during a protest, which turned into a riot?
A reporter that was going to be a pain in the butt.
I was not a pain in the butt. I was not. First of all, stop spreading that rumor. I was not a pain in the butt.
No, no, you weren't. You were really easy to work with. The expectation I really had was there was just going to be a lot of people saying a lot of things that were either going to be, trying to be overly aggressive to start something, or just really crammed into a tight area with a lot of different things going on and a potential threats. So another big factor is that you guys got to do your job. So there's a balance of you doing your job to me doing my job.
Have you been out with a lot of news crews since?
Yeah, that was a very active time. Um, but since in 2021, I think once or twice, but this past year, no.
I was your favorite news crew, I'm guessing.
Definitely the most interesting.
So obviously people know you from, the weapon snatching incident of the AR rifles. Um, and I don't think we have to replay that minute by minute because you and I have talked about it before. But, after that happened, how did your life trajectory change?
It was told to me very early on by some friends that my life is now going to be pre and post, and it very much so is. Because of all that and the attention that it garnered, 2020 was a very hard year financially for a lot of people, my family included. So I dived into the attention to be able to start a business off of it and make sure to be able to provide for family. Um, and that was just happened to be into a profession that I'm already passionate about, which is firearms and teaching. So that and the ability to rapidly learn whatever I need to and like video work and everything. I started doing YouTube channel off of that with content creation on Instagram as well. Was able to turn it into something that it's still going itself.
And what kind of path had you been on before the infamous Weapon Snatcher incident professionally?
Security, um, private security, executive protection, stuff like that. I had just gotten back home from a contract overseas, and I didn't want to travel overseas anymore for work. So I was still, applying to different places and everything, and just doing what jobs I could at the time. But coming back home, and then that was during the tensions with, I think it was Syria, where Soleimani was missiled right outside of where I was. And then coming back home and COVID hitting right then, it was a tumultuous time. So, I mean, fortunately, look, the way things happened, it gave me a projected course that I could, mold to what I want to do.
Yeah, looking back at that time, I still don't know, by the way, what your politics are. Because I feel like you disagree with me on a lot of stuff, but we're like both common sense people. You don't have to tell me what your politics are, but when you look back at like having been down in the riots, because you were not only with me during the weapon snatching incident, but also when our crew got mobbed up at what would become the occupied protest zone, when you looked at the news coverage of those events, what was your take on how it was being portrayed by the press versus what you went through personally?
From what I saw on the ground, both with your crew and multiple others at the time, and then what I was seeing in the media, not just in news, but then what was being put on in TV shows, stuff that was going on in there. Two totally different worlds. It's like two people sitting down and watching a completely different movie. And in my opinion, it's complete BS. Sitting there saying these are peaceful protests and that people are here, for the common good and shit like that. Well, it it says a lot that the people weren't really paying attention to what was going on. The Regardless of what the politics were or was for whoever, there was nothing peaceful about it. I remember one thing very specifically that day that you and I were out after I got the rifles returned. We were doing, I think you were doing a live hit in front of a electronics shop full of speakers, like Bose speakers and everything, and JBL speakers. And a dude walks up right behind you while the camera's pointing at it and starts trying to smash the window out. And I just sat there because like I'm not gonna stop him. I'm gonna let him do what he wants. He's not bothering us. And I just started chuckling to myself because like you're doing this live on the news, and he couldn't break the window, so he just looked like an idiot. Um, there's nothing peaceful about it. How do you have burning vehicles, rounds popping off, and people breaking into stores like North Face and leaving clothes just strewn all over the place? There's no, and people want to sit there and say stuff like that. Go in the middle of it. Tell me if you feel safe.
Yeah, and I tend to think I get stuck sometimes between the um intent, are they intentionally misleading the public, or are they looking at different video, from behind the safety of their keyboard? What is it? But for instance, there was a blogger in Seattle who continues to deny that one of those rioters fired one of the rifles that you took away. I mean, accused me of making that up. And her defense was that no protesters would confirm that he had fired it. For the record, the man fired the gun, right?
First of all, you can deny it all you want. I don't really give a shit. Fact of the matter is, he did. He fired 3 rounds. I had originally thought it was four, but the echo of gunfire inside of the city streets and off the buildings can make it sound like a lot more or less, just because the way the sound bounces. It's actually something that's taught in the military when you're in different terrains, is use the environment to make the gunshot sound from somewhere else. He fired 3 rounds. So there's a video of it. So if someone wants to sit there and look at a video of it and then literally firsthand guy who took the gun from him and sit there and say, "Oh, it didn't happen," okay, you're a liar. That's plain and simple.
Yeah, it's insane gaslighting that I see in the Seattle media, just way too much. The other kind of issue that I thought was interesting, and you and I discussed it, we did a story on your heroics right after it happened. And one thing I thought was fascinating was that almost everybody, I would say 99.9% of people were celebrating what you did. I mean, left, far right, people in the middle, they were like, this guy is amazing. Was that surprising to you?
Um, in a way, no, because it's hard because talking about it makes it sound egotistical or smug. But the fact of the matter is, if you were to take like each political belief or ideology and you put them in front of what was going on, I kind of sidestepped every single one. There was, okay, the 2A side. I was using a firearm to over escalate an issue to de-escalate it, and I didn't have to press around in anybody. Okay, that's great for them. Then you look at the far left and liberal side of everything, and this guy didn't shoot anybody. He just took it, and that's what all police should do, and that's what they should be training to do that. And like that's a bad idea because the fact of the matter is, most times that is never the case. Cops are uniformed. They're very overt, and that's the point. I was covert. He didn't know I was there. And the video that went viral was the second rifle. And if I have video timestamped from a nearby security store that shows from the moment he had his hands on the gun to the moment I took it was 6.5 seconds. For someone who doesn't know what's going on, someone who's just like, oh my gosh, this is cool, there's so much else going on, and versus me, who I was focused, I saw what was going on, that's not a lot of time. 6.5 seconds just went by, right? And then I got us out of there and we left. I didn't have to harm anyone, but there were some people that were really trying to goad me to do it. There's other video showing that. There was no way it could be twisted. The most criticism I got on it was the prior military guys, and I'm one of them, or executive protection guys saying, oh, he failed his job. He didn't do this. He should have done this and all that kind of stuff. Well, fact of the matter is, I believe very firmly still that I still did was right because you were my job to protect. But then my personal duty overtook the fact that, okay, now there's a bigger threat here. Put you guys in the safest place I can and take care of that and get back to you. And no one could chop it up. There's two or three things I wish I would have done differently, but overall, politically, it can't be chopped up. And the other thing people try to get is, oh, no, they shouldn't have left their firearms in that car. Well, there's actually quite a few reasons that they did, and they couldn't get back to it without loss of life on the police side or civilians. So people can butcher it all they want. In fact, and just like every other video that's out there, you can't quarterback it.
Yeah, and for people who would criticize you and say, "Well, your job was the news crew," first of all, you did put us behind a big, I think it was a potted plant, like a concrete potted plant by the Nordstrom's building. And second, I think you know by now that I was one of the most hated reporters in the crowd, and I don't want a person with a gun in the crowd who hates me. I don't know if those guys individually hated me, but I would say that if they were allowed to take those rifles, every single person in the crowd, including myself and our photographer, were at risk. So that argument just doesn't hold water to me.
The vast majority of people aren't going to consider unless you have a way of thinking that comes from a military background or just honestly a lot of common senses. So those rifles, those 5.56 AR-15s, what they're called, they were loaded with frangible ammunition. Frangible, what it means is the second hits drywall or anything, it just completely explodes. It just not explodes like violent, but just into dust. They're meant for not penetrating anything, so they don't over penetrate. And but a 5.56 has a max effective range of over 500 yards, which down a city street, especially in Seattle, you can easily do. I shoot, I train, I teach people. I know exactly what those systems can do. You and I and our photographer, videographer were well within that distance. Everyone was. So even if, according to a lot of executive protection type people, all I did was my job and get you guys out of there. The fact of the matter is, you're still in danger. So is every other American there, in, regardless of if they are there in a stance that I disagree with or whatever. It wasn't my job to agree or disagree with the riot or the protest or the politics. My job is you guys, and then my duty for myself is to protect those I can. So I got to
Yeah.
use the knowledge I have to make the decision.
As you noted, you kind of became this growing figure in the Second Amendment kind of crowd, just guns in general. How much have you really weighed in on publicly the gun control debate that has re-intensified? You try to not give your opinion politically on things.
No, every now and then on like Instagram, I'll put up like, hey, this is what's going on. This is where you can go to combat it. But I really don't weigh in on it much. And it's actually something I've thought a lot about for myself and the reasons why. And the thing I keep coming back to is because it's a people thing. It's it's not a belief thing. So you can have whatever far side here to whatever far side there, and there's two way over here that everything should be allowed, and then there's a complete opposite. It's like, okay, first of all, there's multiple sides to everything. Not every one thing is going to work for every one person, and like recently there's a lot of hate going towards Daniel Defense and Ruger, two major firearms manufacturers, because they stated that they do not support abolishing ATF. So everyone took that, well, just about everyone took that to say, oh, they support it. No, that's not what they said. They stated they didn't support abolishing it. The ATFE, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, explosives, does a lot more than just try to regulate, not regulate, try to manage firearms and the sale of them and everything. Um, and people tend to forget to listen to the dialogue, look at the words taking place, look at the actions. Like they just want to, they hear and then interpret it how they want and run a million miles. It's like, you can't do that. Just like our situation, you can't do that. You got to look at the situation as it is. Verbiage, just like I teach in my classes, how you think it, how you say it, it's how you do it. Verbiage is very important. What is actually happening is very important. So I try to put out when I do weigh in, like not just like, okay, a common sense way, because I think it's really overused, but hey, why don't we look at it a little more broad, a little more open, and consider not to make the decision by it, but consider what they're saying, what's going on, what's actually happening, and make a very smart decision on your opinion, not just million miles that way. Doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
me, and I'm not that kind of person, so I can't fight the masses at times.
Yeah. Anti-fringe. That's what the podcast is for. I didn't know there was a segment of the 2A folks who wanted to abolish the ATF. I hadn't heard about that. Like the libertarians?
A huge portion, because the ATF does take a lot of liberties that they shouldn't. They do try to set out regulations and make laws that they don't have the authority to. They send a lot of letters out to anyone that has like an FFL dealer's license or whatever, or firearms manufacturer, saying, "Oh, you can't do this, you can't do this," and they've done raids on certain places and certain people's, saying, like, trying to confiscate all their what they determined to be illegal, and they have vastly overstepped their bounds. But that's not like, yeah, they need to be reined in, but that's not all they do. And I'm not saying I support or not support. I'm just trying to look at the reality of the situations.
Well, yeah, it's like, the raid on Mar-a-Lago and everybody's like, defund the FBI. And I'm like, okay, let's not defund the agency that like helps track down children who have been sex trafficked. And like, yeah, it's always these very extreme reactions. Just to end with, when you look back at the last 2 years, which I know like were pretty crazy for you, um, if you could go back to that day in the 2020 riots in Seattle and not have worked that day, not have been with our crew that day, would you prefer that? Would you have preferred the whole incident just you weren't part of it?
I've actually never thought about that. I've never considered it. And no, I'm glad I worked. And one of my mentors about another situation said something to me, and I think it applies to the same thing, is the whatever you want to believe in, whatever you want to call it, but the universe put you in that position to make that decision that possibly no one else could have. And I've heard from a lot of people. I mean in the tens of thousands of people saying, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that," or "This is what I would have done. This would have been better," or "I don't think anyone else would have made the decision you made." I think I made the right decision, and I don't think it was a decision many people would have because legally, I was within my rights to stop the threat with lethal force on both people. I just found another way. Um,
Yeah.
so no, I'm glad I were.
Oh, yeah, I do agree with you that, and I have thought about, well, what if he wasn't there and these people would have kept those guns or kept shooting or whatever it is. So, well, shooter Rughi, it's nice to see you. I appreciate you joining us on Fridays with Friends. You're about to move across the country, right?
Yep, I'm leaving the next month.
All right. Well, that check in. Don't forget about your friends here in Seattle, okay?
Absolutely not. The Pacific Northwest is still one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.